Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden. So it's been a couple weeks since I shot a video. A lot of things going on between now and then, and because the evenings are getting dark so early, essentially. Only have about an hour and a half after I get home from work to do anything outside. Last week we had 3 back-to-back frosts and freezes. I think my outside thermometer said it got down to 30, almost 30 degrees that first night. So the annuals in the garden are toast, and I haven't had a chance to remove them yet. I had to do a lot of running around last Tuesday night before the frost Wednesday morning because I needed to unhook my hoses and do all sorts of other stuff to get things prepared for the freeze. Let's take a look at the garden, and then I want to show you some shrubs that I got from Bailey's that we'll be planting today. So interestingly, although we did have a freeze and frost, the sun patients here are still alive underneath. They're trying their hardest to stay, and so we still have a little blooms there, but these are obviously going to be pulled out over the next couple weeks. It's so interesting to see the beautiful hydrangeas that were pink Tuesday just wake up and they're like immediately brown. They were so good looking, but otherwise things are just looking rough. You can see the grasses are toast, the purple fountain grasses anyway, because they are annuals, and then all of these begonias down here. So everything I had been holding out on did get toasted. So although in Southwest Ohio we're zone 6 and our average first frost starts around October 14th, I don't recall since I've been here our frost ever being this early. So it's typically, I think last year it was the night of Halloween Eve, so the 30th, the morning of the 31st, that everything got frosted. And it's just really early, and then we had 80-degree temperatures this week. So this has been the craziest weather for October. We've also not had any rain since the hurricane came through. So things are again dry, and I actually had to disconnect all of my irrigation last week. So things haven't been getting watered regularly, and I'm just noticing now that my hydrangea bed behind me, there's a lot of drooping going on. And that's not necessarily from the frost that we had, because this maple protected a lot of the things under here. A lot of it, some of it may be frost related, but some of it appears to be a lack of hydration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up the water independently and water that while I'm shooting the rest of this video. What's not a priority, I did come through and dig up peonies Saturday, so although I didn't do a whole lot this past weekend, I got my peonies dug up, divided, and moved, and I'll show you where I planted those. Still got to remove this viburnum because this is the one that this variety I'm really allergic to, and I want to get it out of the way in something else here. So for the cut flower garden, you can see how bad the dahlias look. This is what they looked like Wednesday afternoon when I got home from work, and then we had 2 other days of frost on top of that. So they are toasted really easily by frost or freezes. And I've mentioned before, but I'll mention again, although I am zone 6, I'm not digging these up this winter. What comes back next year will come back. Dahlias are typically zone 7 to 8 as far as their hardiness, and I have had them reliably come back in raised beds with some leaf cover. So I'm going to come through and mulch most of these varieties. These 3 right here I'm going to mulch with just wood chips like are here. I'm going to let these dry up a little bit, cut the stalks off, and then cover them with wood chips. I'm not going to be covering this one with wood chips. I don't really like this variety, but it'll also be a test to see if we can get them to winter over under both conditions. So if I lose this variety, I won't be sad. If I don't lose this variety, I may end up pulling it up anyway and getting rid of it because I don't love it. All the peonies are here, and I dug, I think, 6 clumps, and most of them were different varieties. So I ended up with 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 22 different plants that are this big. Like, this is a big peony here. It was the whole size. use the medium like power planter auger that I have. I think it's like 6 inches across, or it might be 8 inches. And the whatever would fit in the hole I put in there. And I still probably could have divided this and got twice as many, but I didn't need that many peonies. I've mentioned I don't love peonies in the garden just because they look a little rough after they get they bloom in the spring, so I didn't want to take up more room in the cut flower garden than necessary for them. And this will be here on the north side of the bed, so they'll bloom early, and then afterwards, if they don't get as much sun, it won't be as bad of an issue from the plants that grow in front of it here. Found my pruners on the ground and they're all rusty. Don't do this to your pruners. I need to clean these up, but sometimes it happens. They must have fell out of my pocket. All right, let's talk about a shrub delivery and some things I got planted yesterday and some things I'm gonna plant tonight. So if you remember, in August, I went to Minnesota to visit Bailey Nurseries, which is the home of first edition shrubs and trees, endless summer hydrangeas, and easy elegance roses. You've probably seen all of those in your garden center. It was a really interesting visit because they do things a lot differently than some of the other places I've done. They start a lot of things from cuttings directly in sand. I talked about that in videos previously. They have a really complex potting mix. It's more complex than others I've seen, and it has a lot of different things added to it: wood fiber, cocoa coir. And what you'll notice, and what I've immediately noticed after getting these shrubs in, is because they have such a complex potting mix, the pots themselves are so heavy. After you water them, they just hold water so well for the plants. And so behind me is the commercial swing set that I've converted into, it's a like swings here and then a porch swing on this side. I had to come through this past week and this past weekend as well and pull up landscape fabric, which I discovered under here when I did the edging around it. So that's also a project that I didn't shoot, and why it looks kind of rough and muddy in here, because the grass had completely grown over landscape fabric. Do not use landscape fabric, please. Just for me, just don't do it for me. And then I ran drip irrigation, which I still got to get drip irrigation to all these plants in here. So let's turn the camera around and talk about it. So after I pulled up the landscape fabric, I did come in and put down some wood chips in areas that wouldn't be planting. So you can see how thick the wood chips are going to be in this area comparatively. There's about a good 6 inches at least of wood chips under this area. And I've got to bring in more with the tractor to cover the rest of this after I get irrigation in. But I wanted to get it completely planted up before I put wood chips down. And in this bed, we have endless summer hydrangeas, including Pop Star, which has been, in my macrophylla hydrangea trials, the most prolifically blooming hydrangea since July of the ones I've planted. You know, I've planted over 20, and it is a beautiful blue right now. I'm going to be doing some things and trying to keep these blue next year, but I have high alkaline soil that may be really difficult to do. So in the front here, we have 5 Pop Star hydrangeas. They stay relatively short, 2.5, 3 foot tall and wide. They are a lace cap hydrangea, but they're really stunning, and they're so floriferous and bloom so quickly and produce so many buds that they're always covered in blooms, usually from spring to frost. Now here, if they do lose their buds over winter because we have a particularly hard winter, that just means they're going to bloom faster and earlier for me than some other varieties of macrophylla and serrata hydrangeas. Behind those I have 5 Pop Star, I have 3 Bloomstruck, which is a larger variety, but that had also done pretty well for me in my last garden as far as rebloom. So Bloomstruck is, I love it because when the soil is kind of neutral, it turns purple, which I really like. And then the stems are also a beautiful red color. You can see this right here, how nice this is. I do like the blue blooms very much on the Pop Star. Look how nice those look. But the red stems and the purple blooms on Bloomstruck, if you've never seen the combination, are really nice. So Bloomstruck gets a little bigger, probably 4 to 5 foot tall and wide. And so because this is, looking at this bed, this is the east side and that's the west side, and that will be in shade after lunch for most of the year. So this is going to get morning sun, eastern morning sun, and then be protected the rest of the day, which will be perfect conditions for these hydrangeas. In the center, I planted some hostas as well that I got from Walters. And then at the back is a Oakleaf hydrangea that I bought and planted a few weeks ago called, gosh, what's it called? Gatsby Pink. So it'll be a pinkish Oakleaf bloom, and it gets really large. And so when I was originally designing this bed, I was going to do the Gatsby hydrangea in the center, the Oakleaf, and then all the other things around it. But because of the way the sun is angling, and this is not getting even sun throughout the day, all that stuff would have not done great on the back side. So it's tiered from shortest to tallest, front to back. Now on this side is the same thing, same plants, except this is a gladiator crabapple, which is a stunning crabapple from the first edition Shrubs and Trees line. I really loved this one when I saw it in Minnesota. You can't see it right now, but the foliage is black, but the berries that it produces are very red. So it's a very striking crabapple as far as shape. It's very narrow and upright rather than being wide, and the color contrast is really great too. So there's that here, and then I've told you about the tricolor beech I planted on that side about a month or so ago. So I'm going to come in and plant some more heuchera and some other shade perennials in here around the hydrangeas, finish up the drip irrigation, and then get mulch or wood chips down on top of this for winter. Now, let's talk about putting wood chips down on a fresh garden bed. I inevitably get this question, and someone will inevitably comment that didn't watch this entire video saying, oh, you shouldn't use wood chips, brand new wood chips in your garden bed. You've seen me do it for all year. I started it last year, and you saw how everything grew. Wood chips, I've read educational articles from universities too. I would recommend you go out there and do your own research. Wood chips on top of the ground without being incorporated into the soil are perfectly fine. They've been perfectly fine for me. Now, if you're digging a hole, you want to try and avoid incorporating wood chips into the planting hole, because as wood chips decompose and break down, they can steal nitrogen from the soil, which will leave your plants a little unhappy. But just know that in my own experience, I have had absolutely zero problems planting with wood chips directly on top of the ground, and there are plenty of university articles out there that will tell you it's also perfectly fine. So do it however you want, but this is what works for me, and I promise you it will probably work for me if you want to go that route. Before I get started planting these, I wanted to talk to you briefly about planting this time of year. Typically, you want to plant shrubs 4 to 6 weeks before your first frost, so these are being planted a little late. Now, here in Southwest Ohio, we have typically wet and cold winters, wet being key, so a lot of the things are not at issue of drying out over winter. But if you have dry winters, you might want to avoid planting evergreens this late, or shrubs, or if you do plant this late, make sure you're keeping water on those until the ground freezes, and maybe even coming out during winter and splashing some water around the plant until it can get well rooted in. Because if you have dry winters, the worst thing that could happen is the plant's roots dry out over winter and die. And so then the plant doesn't survive over winter. So it is a little bit of a risk planting this late in the season here in Ohio, but I have even planted hydrangeas, limelight standards, treeform in January in Ohio, and they have done fine. So just a little tip as far as planting, if you're still planting this time of year, even though we've had our first frost now in Southwest Ohio, some of us have anyway in the country, just to be cautious if you're planting anything now, and to keep it well watered until the ground's frozen. So let's talk about a couple trees before I move to the rest of the shrubs that I received. My goal by the end of this weekend is to have everything in front of you planted. This is a Hot Wings maple, which is really stunning. I have a lot of maples on the property, and I love maples. This one gets 20 to 25 foot tall and 18 to 20 foot wide. And it's called Hot Wings. And what's really interesting about it, it's not necessarily in the shrub or the tree part of first edition shrubs and trees, but the seed heads, which we call sometimes as kids helicopters, are red. So it almost looks like this maple blooms when it produces these seed heads. Now it's got frosted and it's getting its fall color as well, and you can see it's a little orange, a little yellow, really nice. And this is another one that's also not in the first edition shrubs and tree line, but that Bailey grows, called Flame Amur, or Amur. And it is a small maple, 15 to 20 foot tall and wide. And it is, I picked it because it's just a small maple, has really interesting, tiny, kind of serrated leaves. And it is, although a small maple, it'll make a good decorative tree. So instead of a Japanese maple, a type smaller Japanese maple, you can see this one has a really interesting, it's almost kind of like a weeping branch habit right now, and it also has beautiful red fall color, which most of my other maples are orange. So this will be really pretty contrast, and I'll probably be planting some of these maples in the back where I talked about in the last video. So the next one, I've laid my trees down so they don't get damaged by the wind. The next one is called Green Spire. Is it Green Wall Spire? Green Wall Spire Crabapple by First Edition. So an interesting breeding habit that is coming into crabapples is very fastigiate or upright, skinny growth. And this one only gets a foot or two wide and grows immediately upright. You can see the beautiful fruit on it here. The foliage still looks incredible to be this time of the year for a crabapple, starting to get some of its yellow fall color, and they're coming out. This is the new one that's out most recently, and they're coming out with a dark colored one as well over the next couple years. So you can be on the lookout for that in the market so you can get your hands on it when that arrives. This last tree here is Parkland Pillar birch, and it will have nice white bark as it ages. I really like this one because it's low branched, and so it gives me the opportunity to keep a low branch birch or to limit up to have more upright under canopy, and it grows very skinny. So this one's going to be going in the backyard behind the fence as well. Really stunning tree. I had one birch on the property, as you know, it was up near the garage, and I removed that because it was diseased. But this is a new, really interesting birch that's meant to be planted, you can see in the image here, in smaller spaces. So it has a dense dark green foliage that turns yellow, as you can see, in fall. So it'll be a nice accent color for fall as well. As we head to look at some of the shrubs, you can order these shrubs. I think I was told the last day to place an order and still get your shrubs this year, if you're interested in planting them, is October 31st. Or you can potentially order during winter and then they'll ship in the spring for you. So I showed you some shrubs already from Endless Summer. What's left over is first edition shrubs and a couple Easy Elegance roses. So let's take a look at that. So you can see I've arranged them here to fill space in the areas that were empty. Still got a few things. Not all of my order arrived this fall, and so I'll be getting some of that was left over in the spring. But let's take a look at some of these. It's getting pretty windy this evening, so hopefully my audio is fine. But First Edition Shrubs and Trees also has some Potentillas, which I have started planting here recently, as you know. This is an orange one called Marmalade. Potentillas are deer resistant, so I'm planting it on the edge of these borders. This one looks very dense and compact, which I'm really liking. The blooms look a little yellow now. It's probably the temperature. You can see this one looks a little more orange than the other one here. So in regular temperatures in the summer when it's hot, it will be a little more orange. Plant it to the front of the border. Hopefully will deter some deer from munching on anything if I have any deer issues back here, which we haven't had a whole lot of issues yet. And it'll be a nice little accent, interesting foliage, and will bloom from early summer until frost like it is now. This is another flowerful hydrangea. I've showed you those quite a bit so far. I'm growing a hedge of them up there on the other side of the fence. Really good, really flowering variety that's really full, produces a ton of blooms, and has really incredibly strong stems for an arborescens hydrangea. We have a cobalt and gold hypericum, or a St. John's wort. I planted this one before at my last garden. It is beautiful, has beautiful foliage. That's why I love it. And then it produces the gold or the yellow flowers. And so I'm putting it as an accent under this Venus dogwood that I just transplanted back here a couple weeks ago. So this is Shining Sensation Yila, which has dark foliage and pink blooms. It gets roughly 5 to 6 foot tall and 3 to 4 foot wide. Yilas I recommend quite often for us up here in the north because they are beautiful plants that bloom in the spring. They typically have nice foliage. And if you can't grow azaleas, like a lot of us don't have a great time with azaleas because of our soil pH, or our winters here because they're marginally hardy, sometimes just down to zone 6. But this would be a good option for those of you who want the early spring blooms that some of those other varieties like azaleas and rhododendrons provide. This is an azalea, so you know I'm trying a lot of azaleas and camellias in this bed back here. Anyway, this one gets pretty big. It's called Electric Lights Double Pink, and it gets 6 to 7 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. Now in our zone, although this says it's hardy down to zone 4, so really hardy, so it will get pretty big, but I've got it next to this camellia I'm trying as well. This is a snowberry called Galaxy that produces white berries. These berries on these plants, and the scientific name is Symphocarpus, they last forever in arrangements. And so that's one of the reasons I picked a white one, is it's close to the cut flower garden. I can snip a few here and there to add to cut flower arrangements if I want to for some interesting, both the foliage is really neat because they're almost bluish, similar to eucalyptus, but the berries this time of year are just really, really stunning. And they'll stay on here until it freezes and the birds pick them off or they turn a little mushy. All right, the first rose, and this one is Calypso, and I picked it out just because it's a small little pink rose. It only gets 2 by 2, but look how stunning this bud is here. I don't have any active, here's one that's a little faded, blooms on it, but I will try and get a picture of this one if it blooms out before I post this video and show it to you. But look how stunningly dark this foliage is on this rose. I love a rose that has dark foliage. They just look healthier to me, and this is one of them. So it's going to stay really short, front of the border here. Will bloom spring to frost. It's good for cut flowers, and it's disease resistant. So easy elegance roses are bred just to be easy and elegant in your garden and be a convenient plant for those of you who like to grow roses without the fuss. These are some interesting things that we saw at the Bailey Expo when we were there in Minnesota. They're not necessarily first edition shrubs and trees, but look at this texture. It's called a Crispa cutleaf Stephanandra. You can see it there on the tag. I probably butchered that name, but it's mostly a creepy crawly ground cover. Only gets 1 foot to 2 foot tall and 3 to 6 foot wide potentially. But like, you can't beat, like, seeing it in the container looks a little rough now because it's been frosted and frozen, but it's really like a stunning textural element to the garden. So I've got it next to this rose and next to some other things that'll provide interesting texture here as well. This is an Amber Jubilee Ninebark, which I am so excited to have in the garden. Its color now is darker than it typically is. It kind of emerges like a yellow and orange, which is really beautiful. Excellent filler for cut flower arrangements as well. So I placed it kind of close to the cut flower garden. 5 to 7 foot wide, or 5 to 7 foot tall and 4 to 6 foot wide. And it will look really stunning next to this other Ninebark. And this is Lucky Devil, so let me stand back. Look how brilliantly yellow that is. I planted one of these in my garden at the last house as well. Didn't really get to see it come to its full potential because we moved, but it was one of the first ones on the list when I started making a list from first editions for their shrubs, because there's not many yellow, I don't know of another yellow Ninebark on the market. So it's different, and it also adds a weight of yellow in this space. So if you'll notice, I have yellow here, I have yellow there, and then I have a yellow evergreen over there. So there's a pop of yellow almost all the way when you go around this bed. I need a little more yellow over here, but I really love yellow in the garden. I know some people do not. I am not one of those people. Give me all the yellow things. And then this is a really interesting button bush, which I believe is a native here to North America, called fiber optics. So it produces these really cool seed heads that look like little galaxies almost. So it's really interesting. It can get pretty big, 5 to 6 foot tall and 5 to 6 foot wide. I positioned it right here. I don't know that I'm going to be planting it right here this evening. I'm probably going to stick it over here, and I might plant it in this border or save it until I get started planting things back here along this bed that I'm going to start establishing here. So I think that might get moved, but I wanted to show it to you. This is another one of those sapphire surf bluebeards that I showed you a couple videos ago. Excellent pollinator magnet when it blooms in late summer. I showed videos of how many pollinators were on this. Also really beautiful blue foliage outside of when it blooms. Look at this wind. It's like it's gonna storm. I don't know if it's supposed to rain today or not, but very odd windiness going on. This is another potentilla. This is lemon meringue, I think. This one's yellow. No, this is creme brulee. I think lemon meringue is another one that I am missing from the shipment and will probably get in spring. But creme brulee blooms white, so it's also a small deer-resistant shrub, 3 foot tall and wide-ish, hardy down to zone 2 and hardy up to zone 6. So it's a very cold hardy plant, but it doesn't like the heat, and it will be perfect. Interesting thing about these have a lot of nice wood on them here. Some of the other potentillas I've gotten are not that woody, so I'm glad to see some structure in this one right here. I am so excited that this one arrived. This one is called Champagne Wishes, and it smells phenomenal. So I kind of avoid a lot of white roses sometimes because they can get, if they get overhead irrigation, they look pretty rough. I don't have that issue here with overhead irrigation. Let me skip back, make sure you can see a good video picture of it. But look how lightly pink this bloom is. And the fragrance on it, I'm telling you, it's one of the best smelling roses I have in the garden. The foliage isn't quite as dark as the one I just showed you, but this is what, it's a shrub rose, gets a little bigger too. So 3 to 4 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So a little narrower, hardy from zones 4 to 7. But I've started seeing Easy Elegance roses at my local big box stores. They were originally more available kind of on the east. It's a relatively newer brand for Bailey is my understanding, and they're going to start expanding that across the country. So although you may have not seen them in your local garden center recently, you may start seeing them more coming up here in the next year. And if you can find either of the two that I showed you, really nice. They also have a lot of really other beautiful ones too. I just want to keep this border a little less maintenance, and sometimes roses require trimming, and I don't want to have to be fiddling with a lot of this stuff in here too much. So keeping it a little simple there with 2 or so roses in this border, but I just think the color is absolutely stunning here. Be a nice pop of white with the other things here, and combined with this butterfly bush, the pink on it, perfect. Now, talk about texture. This is one that's not in the first edition shrubs line, but it is called a blue leaf Arctic willow, and it's a dwarf, but it still gets pretty big. It says it'll get 3 to 6 foot tall and wide, so it probably depends on the location. It likes moist locations like most willows and full sun. So because this can potentially get so big, I am designating it for either this flower bed that I'm standing in or the one I'm going to be forming over there. So it's not going to be planted today, but I wanted to show it to you. This one is beautiful. We saw it at the Bailey Expo, the Bailey Customer Expo when we were in Minnesota. They had some out showing their clients that they were coming in later that week, and compared with other plants that they had, like there's not much that offers you this type of texture. in your garden. So really stunning, and will make an excellent accent piece or a spotlight shrub in the garden. All right, last one I think for today. Well, I have a couple more. So this is a Oakleaf hydrangea called Jetstrein. I like it, has really small leaves compared to a lot of other big ones. So it adds a little more texture to the garden, but it can get a little bigger, not as big as most Oakleafs though. So 5 to 6 foot tall and 4 to 5 foot wide. This one's probably going to be designated for this bed or the new one I form. Got to get the trees laid out and see where I want to put them, and then tuck some shrubs between them. So this is also a wait and see to where it goes, and won't be planted today, but I wanted to show it to you because look at this fall color. Really stunning. The last two are Little Devil Ninebark and Iceberg Alley Sageleaf Willow. So I already have a Sageleaf Willow in the shrub border. It's on the far end there next to the water hose. I have ordered 2 of these Little Devil Ninebarks. One is going up front, one is going in the cut flower garden. So this is being put in the cut flower garden, and this one, because both of these shrubs are excellently used as cut foliage and arrangements. We actually had a bouquet bar at Bailey's when we went up there and made our own arrangements, and the people that got their hands on the Sageleaf Willow had really stunning arrangements. So Little Devil stays a little smaller, but it has really fine leaves that also make good arrangement filler. But this right here, this Iceberg Alley, if you can find it or order it online, excellent, excellent plant for your landscape that you can clip on and add with roses it looks stunning with, or any other kind of bulky cut flower. It would be beautiful with dahlias, just a really, really nice shrub. I received all of these shrubs from Bailey to trial in the garden, so thank you to Bailey Nurseries for providing those to me. Thank you for 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 for agreeing to deliver them for me. And thank you to Ryan, Katie, and Gretchen from Bailey for being such generous people to provide those shrubs to me at Bailey. All right, well, thank y'all for joining me. I'm going to grab my auger and plant all of this in the shrub border this evening. I got all the hydrangeas planted last night, and like I said, with the goal to get everything planted by the end of the weekend, including the trees. I've got to do as much in the evenings as I can when I come home from work. So thank you for joining me and following along on my journey this fall. I'm going to keep you up to date on progress. There's still things to do in the garden, and there's still a lot of things I need to wrap up, but the planting I hope is at least done so the garden beds can settle in, or will be done so the garden beds can settle in for fall. Thank y'all for joining, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.